Hello YouTube and welcome to the next routes learning video. On today's video we're going to be revisiting the Wherry lines and covering the final of the 3 different routes which you can take on this add-on. So I'm going to be driving a DRS Class 47, hauling a dead Class 90 set on a non-stop run between Norwich and Great Yarmouth via Reedham. The scenario that I'm using is one from Armstrong Powerhouse Scenario Pack 43 and is entitled 1v18, 10 o'clock London Liverpool Street to Norwich. The total distance for the journey is around 22¼ miles. What I'm going to have to do in a moment is just shunt the loco into the platform at Norwich and couple up to the Class 90 set which is already parked there. And then after that there's around a 10-minute wait at Norwich station, so I'm just going to show a couple of external shots and then significantly shorten the wait, as I feel that 10 minutes is just a bit too long to be waiting in a video. And then after that I'm going to drive non-stop out to Great Yarmouth, and then once we reach Great Yarmouth I'm going to have to do a little bit of shunting at the other end to run around the train before the scenario is completed. This is the first time that a Class 47 has featured in one of my videos, so I thought it would help to give a bit more variety than the usual trains I seem to end up driving. Plus it's nice to drive a loco hauled service sometimes instead of just driving units. The Class 47 is a diesel-electric locomotive built by Brush Traction at British Rail Crew Works. They were built between 1962 and 1968, with a total of 512 locomotives produced, which were eventually sorted into different subtypes. The total weight of each locomotive is between 112 and 125 tonnes, with a fuel capacity of 850 imperial gallons, or 1020 American gallons. They have a maximum speed of between 75 and 95 miles per hour, and the example I'm driving today has a maximum speed of 95, but due to special restrictions I'm not going to be able to get above 50 miles per hour at any point on this journey today. They have a power output of 2,750 bhp, which was later derated to 2,580 bhp to improve reliability. And they have a maximum tractive effort of between 55,000 and 60,000 pounds of force. Jumping into the cab of the Class 47 in this scenario, the first thing I need to do is change ends, as we're currently at the wrong end for driving into the platform at Norwich. So I'm just going to press Ctrl and plus just to change the ends here. And now that I've done that, there's literally 2 things that I need to do to set up ready for departure. The first is to put the reversing handle into the forward position with the W key. And the second now is simply to press H to turn on the headlights. Now that I've done that, we are set up ready to move. I just quickly want to go through some of the cab controls here in the locomotive. So from left to right, on the left hand side here we've got the train brake, which controls the brakes on the entire train. And then just to the right of that is the locomotive brake handle, which controls the brakes purely on the locomotive. I will only need to use the train brake handle on this journey today. Now if we go around the cab here, you can see the gauge in the middle there which says bogey 1 and bogey 2, with the 2 needles currently pointing to around 70. That's the brake cylinder pressure gauge, and so when looking at that you can see how hard the brakes are applied by how high the needles are pointing, and when the 2 needles are pointing to 0 then the brakes are fully released. I shouldn't need to go above 40 at any point on this journey today, which should give us a nice sort of mild to moderate brake force, which should give the passengers a more gentle run. In front of us here is the horn control, which is a 2-tone horn controlled with the spacebar and the B key. And now if we continue to the right, you can see the speedometer there measured in miles per hour. As already mentioned, the maximum speed of this loco is 95 miles per hour, but we won't be allowed to go above 50 at any point on this journey today. If we now continue towards the right, you can see there a handle with a red bulb on the end, or a red knob on the end. Now that is the throttle control, and in the Class 47, I don't know if it's like this in reality, but certainly how it's been simulated in Train Simulator, it's actually very smooth moving, so I can make very small adjustments to the power settings. We've got the reversing handle just to the right of the throttle control there, and now if we just continue further to the right, you can see there a gauge which says KA in the middle, which is the ammeter, with the KA standing for kilo amps, which is how many thousands of amps are currently being sent through the traction motors, if I remember correctly. Unfortunately, I'm not an engineer, so I can't remember all of the principles involved. Now, as you apply power, you'll see that needle climb, and you can see there's a yellow zone on the ammeter there, as well as a green zone. So what I'm going to try and do is keep that needle within the green zone, or let it go just into the yellow zone, but not too far. And another thing you will find with this locomotive, which is in common with most diesel electric locomotives within the UK, is that when you get to a certain speed, in this locomotive 24 to 25 miles per hour, then all of a sudden the ammeter will jump quickly. And so what I do at that point is I just try and cut the power back, just to try and ensure that it doesn't jolt the passengers too much, and that we're not generating too much current. Okay, so now we've gone through the cab controls, I'm now ready to start moving, so I'm just going to release the brake handle at this point and drive the 1/4 mile towards the station. The speed limit here is 25 miles per hour, however I'm not planning on going anything above 10 miles per hour between here and the platform at Norwich. We're now doing 10 miles per hour, so I've just idled the power to allow the train to coast at this point. I'm going to just gradually start braking as we enter the platform, so that we couple up to the train ahead very gently. The brakes are on now very lightly, just below 20 on the brake cylinder gauge there, and now we're doing 5 miles per hour. I'm just going to release the brakes again for a moment, and then I'll increase the braking as we get closer to the train ahead. We're now doing around 1 mile per hour. I'm just going to brake slightly more, and now just allow the locomotive to couple into the train. And once we touch the train, then we stop moving like so. And now just going to apply the brakes, and I now need to press the key command Control, Shift and C to couple up to the train. And at that point there will be quite a jolt in this locomotive, so you can see there was quite a jolt there. And now we've been told that the instruction is complete, so I need to load and unload the passengers here. So I'll just close that box. I'm going to press T to start the loading and unloading process. Just increase the braking slightly. And now let's pan to a couple of shots around Norwich station before jumping into the locomotive at the other end and heading out towards Great Yarmouth. Departing Norwich, the starting speed limit is 25 miles per hour, and at this point we've got just under 20.5 miles to go to Great Yarmouth. So I'm just gradually bringing up the power here to try and keep the ammeter needle around number 2 and try not to go above it too much. As you can see, the ammeter needle is falling here, so I can now increase the power. In fact, I've now put the power handle temporarily into full power, although I will reduce it as we get towards 25 miles per hour before the ammeter jumps to a high setting. The line towards London Liverpool Street now turns off to the right, and we're just about to pass Norwich Crown Point Depot. Probably noticed there the ammeter jumped rather rapidly. I didn't quite pull the power handle back in time, so as soon as it did jump I pulled the power handle back quickly. I'm not sure what the real life driving technique would be when using or when driving with the ammeter and trying to prevent it from going too high, so if anyone can help me enlighten me on what the real life driving technique would be, then please do let me know in the comments. The speed limit has just gone up to 60 miles per hour, but I've just got to wait until the rear of the train has cleared the speed board, and we should have cleared the board as we reach this overbridge just here. So I've now increased the power to start accelerating towards 60 miles per hour. Once we get to around 35 miles per hour, I will then be able to go into full power all of the way up to our maximum 50 mile per hour speed limits. The ammeter just jumps once again, but on this second jump it jumps to only just above the 2, so I don't feel the need to respond by reducing the power. As we're now approaching 50 miles per hour, I'm now significantly reducing the power just to ensure that we don't end up speeding. And if I just put the power handle in a very low setting, that should maintain us at a speed of around 50 miles per hour. So as you should be able to see there, the ammeter is literally just above 0, and that's roughly the position I want it to be in to maintain the speed. Although if I do lose a little bit of speed, then I will just increase the power handle very slightly to bring us back up towards 50. The line now diverging off to the left here is the line towards Cromer and Sheringham. So I have increased the power very slightly to what would probably be around 200 amps, and that seems to be maintaining us at a speed of around 49 miles per hour. We will soon have a Morpeth board warning us of an upcoming speed restriction, which will be for 20 miles per hour. This speed restriction only applies to loco haul trains along this route, and it's for a particular bridge. I'm still not quite sure why this speed restriction is enforced for locomotives and not for other train types, but it will certainly be applying to me on this journey, and so I think it's just around the area of this bridge we're going to get the AWS warning for that upcoming 20 limit. And so as we approach the Morpeth board, I am then going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast. So we're just coming up on the Morpeth board now, so I've just shut off the power. That warning is half a mile from the limit itself. I'm going to apply the brakes for the speed limit as we approach this next overbridge just coming up. I've now got the brakes in around 30 on the brake cylinder gauge, which should be bringing our speed down quite nicely. The speed restriction comes into force shortly after entering the next left-hand curve coming up just ahead. In fact, I've just increased the braking as I wasn't sure if we were going to slow down quite quick enough. We should now be down to 20 in time. So just gone up to 40 there on the brake gauge, and we're just coming up on the 20 speed board, so I'm just reducing the braking and now fully releasing as we're doing 20 miles per hour. At this point I'm just going to allow the train to coast at 20. As you can see, the speed limit is almost immediately going back up to 60 miles per hour or 50 miles per hour for this particular train, and I can accelerate up towards that speed limit just after we've passed the overbridge coming up just ahead. As we've now passed the overbridge, I'm just going to start increasing the power once again. I can initially go up to full power, as at this point it won't take the ammeter to a high reading. And as we get towards 25, I'm once again going to cut the power handle back down to try and ensure that we don't jolt passengers and accelerate too quickly. And now that we're doing around 35 miles per hour, we're now back into full power to accelerate up towards 50, at which point I'll then go back to a very low power setting to try and maintain us at around that speed. Have now significantly reduced the power as we're approaching 50 miles per hour, and we're now coming up on Brundle Gardens station, which is the first station out of Norwich. We now have a single yellow signal, which is around 2/3 of a mile from the next home signal, so I do need now to slow down and start driving with caution, assuming that the next signal is red until I can see otherwise. So I've now made a brake application up to 30 on the brake cylinder gauge there. Our speed is coming down quite nicely as we head towards the next station, which is Brundle, where the adverse signals will be. I've now released the brakes at around 25 miles per hour, and I'm just keeping a close lookout for the signal ahead. I can now see the signal, so I'm now reapplying the brakes to ensure that I do slow down in time. The signal is currently displaying an on or red aspect, although I see it's just come off now. The signal's just gone up and we've now got a green light, which means I can accelerate a little. However, I still need to drive with caution, as that signal is not at the end of the signal section, so the single yellow signal that we had was guarding more than one signal. And so just because this signal is off and green doesn't mean the next one will be, and the next one is just at the end of the platform here at Brundle Station. I can now see that the signal at the end of the platform here at Brundle has now come off, which means I am now cleared to accelerate. That is, I believe, the last signal in this signal section. So as a result of that, I can now accelerate back up towards the 50 mile per hour speed limit. The line now turning off to the left is the line to Great Yarmouth via Acle, which is in fact the last journey that I covered on this route in a video, which was done in the opposite direction 2 or 3 months ago now. As we're now doing 50 miles per hour, I've now just cut the power and now brought it back up to a very low setting. So once again, try and maintain the speed. We're now coming up on Buckenham Station. After this video, the next video which I'm hoping to make now is the journey from London Victoria to Sheerness-on-Sea, which I mentioned in the last video. Also, I am still aware that I need to try and make an updated FOV tutorial, but I understand there's actually more than one potential fix for the FOV, so I'm trying to work out which one would be the best one to cover and the easiest one to cover, and then put that in a video, so you can still expect to see that video coming up quite soon. So just gone across a couple of minor gradient changes, initially an uphill gradient, and now we're on a downhill gradient. So I've just idled the power for a moment to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. I've just made a very light brake application just to bring our speed down very slightly. The gradient will be levelling out just here at the end of this right-hand curve. We're now coming up on Cantley Station. As always, I'd just like to apologise for the lag on this video. I'm not actually quite sure why it's lagging as much as it is. I do know it's got something to do with the game engine. That's why the horn went slightly funny for a moment there, and I ended up sounding the final tone twice, just because it actually stopped sounding as the game decided to lag for a moment. We now have another single yellow signal, and this single yellow signal is 3/4 of a mile from the upcoming next home signal, and so I've just idled the power now to allow the train to coast. I'm going to start applying the brakes very shortly before we reach the next left-hand curve, just to slow us down once again, assuming that the next signal is displaying a red or stop aspect, until I can see otherwise. The AWS round that we've just crossed is for a Morpeth board warning for an upcoming 15 mph speed restriction. However, the 15 mph limit comes into force earlier for this train than it would for other trains, so if I was driving a different train type it would come into force after Reedham station, which is just coming up. However, for us, for some reason, if you're dragging a class 90, you're actually restricted to 15 mph before the platform at Reedham. I see the signal ahead has now come off, so I've just released the brakes and I'm allowing the train to coast for a moment. I will apply the brakes to slow us down to 15 just before we enter the platform, so I should be able to brake quite lightly from this speed. So we are now down to 15 mph and we're now passing through Reedham station. It appears that with this end of the platform on both sides being significantly overgrown, that it's only the shorter other end of the platform which is currently used today. So we're now going to be stuck at 15 mph for a couple of minutes before we'll be able to accelerate once again. As you can see, with the power simply in idle and allowing the train to coast, we're holding a speed very close to 15 mph. We're slowing down incredibly slowly, so as a result of that, I shouldn't really need much in the way of power until we're actually allowed to accelerate again to the upcoming speed limit. So we're just about to pass a 60 mile per hour speed board here, indicating that we will be able to accelerate back to our maximum speed of 50 miles per hour, and I'll be able to start accelerating just before we reach the next overbridge you can see coming up just ahead. So I'm now starting to give us power, as at this point I know that I can now start accelerating back up towards line speed. And the line diverging to the right just here is the line towards Lowestoft, which is in fact the journey that I covered on my first video on this add-on. So from this point between here and Great Yarmouth is completely new track, which I haven't yet covered in any video at all. At Reedham station that we passed through a couple of minutes ago, we had 8 miles to go to Great Yarmouth, and there's now one more station that we will pass through between here and Great Yarmouth, which is Burney Arms, and at Burney Arms we've then got just under 4.5 miles to go to Great Yarmouth station. We're now back to around 50 miles per hour, so once again just use a low power setting along here to maintain the speed at around 50 and make very minor adjustments to the power handle if you feel that you're speeding up or slowing down too much. We're now coming up on Burney Arms Station. At this point, we've now got around 4 miles to go to Great Yarmouth. We now have a warning for an upcoming temporary speed restriction of 20 miles per hour. So I've just made sure that I shut off the power at this point, and I'm now going to start applying the brakes as we reach this next crossing just here. So I'm braking initially up to 30 on the brake gauge. That should bring our speed down about right. We're going to enter a right curve before the temporary speed restriction comes into force. And I must also warn you that if you're driving this scenario with the HUD turned on, you won't actually see the 20 speed limit marked on the HUD. You'll only be able to see the markings for the speed limit from the track side. I just released the brakes momentarily as I felt that we were slowing down just slightly too quick there. I will reapply as we approach this right-hand curve. I'm just trying to look out for the speed post, which indicates where the 20 mile per hour speed restriction actually begins. So I can see it's just coming up just ahead now. So I've just applied the brakes up to 40 there, so I wasn't going quite slow enough. That's brought the speed down nicely, and we're now doing 20 miles per hour in time for the 20 speed zone. So what I need to look out for now is the T or termination sign, and once we've passed that, that indicates that we've then left the speed zone. In fact, you can see that sign just coming up now on the right hand side. Sorry, not the right, the left hand side here. The one on the right hand side will be the start of the speed zone for the opposite direction. And so I now have to wait until the rear of the train has cleared the board. I couldn't see a clear landmark here to really indicate at which point the rear of the train will be clear. I do know that it will be after these trees, and just before we get to the next set of trees you can see coming up just ahead. So somewhere between the two I'm then able to accelerate, so I'm just going to wait a little while longer until I'm a bit closer to the trees ahead, and then I'm going to start accelerating up towards 50 miles per hour once again. And at this point we've now got around 2.5 miles to go to Great Yarmouth. The AWS warning that we've just crossed can be ignored because you can see the cross sign that we just passed on the left hand side there, and that sign indicates that the AWS warning was in force for the opposite direction and not for this direction. I've once again pulled the power right back as we've approached 50 miles per hour. I'm just going to make small adjustments once again to try and maintain the speed. If you look to the left now, you can just see in the distance there the line from Acle, so the line that turned off at Brundle and went through Acle to Great Yarmouth, which is just about to join us from the left-hand side. As we now join the line from Acle, we've got just under 1 mile to go to an upcoming 15 mile per hour speed limit, and so from this point I'm now going to shut off the power completely to allow the train to coast. I'm now looking out for the next whistleboard. At that whistleboard we've then got around half a mile to go to the 15 limit, and so I need to prepare to brake once we reach that whistleboard. In fact, after we've passed it, I'm going to apply the brakes as the next signal comes into sight. So I've just reached the whistleboard now, which means that we've got around half a mile to go. And now I'm just looking out for the next signal ahead. I can now see the next signal, so I am now going to start applying the brakes here to bring us down towards 15. I've put the brakes on at 30 on the brake cylinder gauge there, which I think should be about right to bring our speed down, but I will increase the braking if necessary to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit here. We're now down to 25 and I can't quite see the 15 mile per hour speed post yet, so I'm just trying to ensure that I'm not going to slow down too quickly. I can now see the post just coming up, I believe, so I've just reapplied the brakes once again to bring our speed down to 15, and we're now down to 15 miles per hour in time for the 15 mile per hour speed board, which is just here. From this point I'm just going to coast into Great Yarmouth station, and I've got to stop at a very specific point which is marked on the HUD, but of course I'm not using the HUD, so I've got to try and guess the correct point. So we've got the instruction here: hello driver, you will need to run around at Great Yarmouth, so please make sure that you stop at the Great Yarmouth 2 Loco runaround stopping points as shown on the F3 F4 HUD. Basically, the stopping point is just before the point at the end of the platform, which gives me enough room to uncouple from the train, drive forward, and then reverse and drive onto the other track and past the train without hitting it. So I'm now just going to gradually fan the brakes and bring us to a gentle stop at the correct stopping point. At that point I then need to open the doors, and from doing that I'm then going to pan to an outside view so that I can show you me decoupling the locomotive from the rest of the train. And then after that I'm going to get back in the cab and drive forward right to the end up to the buffer stops. And then going to need to turn on the 2D map just to change the point. Then I'm going to drive through the opposite platform and a little bit further along, stop, change ends, and then drive back into the platform here to couple up to the train, and then push it right up to the buffer stops at the end of the platform. This should now be about the right place to stop. For some reason you may have noticed that the platform building in front of us a moment ago was just an all black sort of blobby texture. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but it appears the asset didn't load properly. So I've just done a very quick save and reload at this point, and so now the building is displaying correctly. So what I need to do now is uncouple the locomotive from the Class 90 locomotive directly behind it. So I'm just going to move the cursor straight over the coupling and double click. So we are now uncoupled from the Class 90 set. And so the instruction now is to pull forward to the buffers in front of me, change the points, and then head through platform 3 to Great Yarmouth Reedham run round. Now that we've uncoupled, I'm now back in the cab and I'm ready to drive forward up to the buffers ahead. So I've just released the brakes here, and now I'm going to give a very low amount of power just to bring our speed up slightly. And as we get to around 3 miles per hour, I'm now going to shut off the power and just allow the train to coast here towards the buffers. One thing that you do have to bear in mind when driving the Class 47 is that actually you look closer to the buffers than you are in reality, and I need to stop as close as possible to ensure that the train has cleared the point behind us, which I need to change in a moment. So I'm just gradually bringing us to a stop here just in front of the buffers, and this should now be about the right place to stop. I now need to bring up the mini-map, and as I do, you're going to notice a graphical glitch, so I've just brought that up now, and I need to click on Center Player, and you'll see that it's giving me a very, very strange graphical effect. And this is due to a clash between the NVIDIA drivers and the anti-aliasing setting that I'm currently using. I can see that the red line there is my train, and I can see there's a blue dot just above it which is actually marking the point, so I'm just going to click on that now just to alter the point, so I now know that we're set to travel in the right direction. I have now changed ends of the locomotive, so I'm now just going to release the brakes and drive forward. The speed limit here is 15 miles per hour, so I can accelerate up towards that. I'm not really going to accelerate too quickly, and I'm going to aim for a speed between 10 and 15, probably closer to 10 miles per hour. I now need to drive right up to the Loco runaround, which is just beyond the station. And we're now doing around 11 miles per hour, so at this point I've just shut off the power to allow the train to coast. I don't think I'm going to need to apply any more power now between here and the stopping point. The signal ahead, I'm just going to press tab to request permission to pass it at danger. Normally you would stop and request permission if there was a faulty signal, but in this case I just know the signal's stuck at red when it shouldn't be, and I just found it easy just to press it while moving, so that's just a bit of laziness, but not exactly correct railway operating procedure. Just going to give us a little bit of power here as I feel that we're slowing down slightly too much. So I'm just going to bring the speed up a little more. We're now up to around 12 miles per hour, and I've now once again shut off the power. I'm aiming to stop by a concrete wall, which you can see on the left hand side coming up in a moment, which looks like it's in place of buffer stops on the siding on the left hand side. So I've now got the brakes on gently as we get towards the concrete wall just here. I'm just fanning the brakes to try and bring us to a controlled stop, roughly with the wall in the left-hand window here. This should now be about the right place, just overshot it slightly. It's still the correct stopping point for the turnaround, so I'm just going to stop here for a few seconds and then change ends and drive back into Great Yarmouth station. So I have now changed ends of the locomotive, and I also altered the point at the end of the platform before I started the recording again, just so I didn't have to face that graphical glitch in the video. It actually seemed worse when recording than it is when I'm not recording. So I can now proceed forward towards the train ahead. Although the speed limit is 15, I am not going to go above 10 miles per hour at any point. And then I'm going to gradually bring the speed down and gently couple up to the train before driving forward to the correct stopping point and opening the doors to let the passengers on and off. So the brakes are now on lightly just to start bringing the speed down. I don't really want to be going much above 5 miles per hour at this point due to the close proximity of the train ahead. In fact, I'm going to leave the brakes on slightly longer and slow down a bit more. It seems this is a good brake force to gently bring the speed down here. And so we're now doing around 3 miles per hour. I'm going to bring that speed down even more as we get closer to the train. So now doing about the right speed to couple up. I'm just going to keep moving until we stop moving as we touch the train ahead. So as our buffers contact the DVT's buffers, then I'll know that I'm in the right place. Should be any moment, so that's now done. I just now need to press Ctrl Shift and C to couple up to the train. And now I need to push the train forward into the platform so that it is fully within the platform here, as it says. And I need to make sure that the points are switched, which I've already done. And then once I've done that, I can load and unload the passengers once again. So now I'm just going to release the brakes, and I'm going to give us a tiny bit of power here. I'm certainly not going to move at high speed. I'm now going to put my head out of the window. You can see there the other end of the train, and if I zoom right in, you can actually see how far we've moved. However, you wouldn't be able to zoom in real life, and drivers don't normally carry binoculars. So I'm going to try and do this the proper way, which means I'm going to drive a bit further up into the platform until we've reached the next platform sign. So we've just passed the first platform sign, which says Great Yarmouth. I'm now looking for the second one, and if we stop just beyond that, then we should be stopped in just about the right place. So just coming up on the second platform sign now. Just going to wait until we're just a little bit past it. Just going to apply the brakes very lightly now just to bring our speed down. I'm just fanning the brakes to bring us to a controlled stop. And this should be now about the right place to stop. So now I've stopped here. I'm just going to increase the brake force, get back in the cab and change to the other end, ready for departure back towards Norwich. So that's it. Final arrival at Great Yarmouth. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you have enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please don't forget that for the latest updates, you can find me on Facebook, and the link to my Facebook page is in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.